Morning, y'all. Pleasure to be with you today. Again, my name is Steve Korn, and I'm the new discipleship minister. I thought I'd start out today. I want to show you a picture of my family here. He already grilled me this morning with the minute questions, but he learned a little bit more. This is my wife, Miranda, on the far left here, and she is, I guess we've been married right at 20 years at this point. January was 20 years, and so she's the best thing that's ever happened to me besides Jesus himself. Would not have the life I have without her presence. My son, Kason, is going to be a junior in high school. He goes to Brazos Wood High School, and you're going to hear more about him in just a second. And then that's my daughter, Kesley. She's going to be a sophomore at Brazos Wood as well. Then you see me with a big smile on my face as a proud father, because that's exactly how I feel about them. Such a joy to be able to be a part of their lives and have them in mind. But today I wanted to tell you a story specifically about my son, Kason. He actually gave me permission to tell this story, so I'm not doing anything that he would be upset by. But it's not necessarily a story he'll be super proud of either. Growing up, Kason, from a very young age, he was really good at physical things. He learned to walk. I feel like it was early, but I don't know enough about development to know that. I feel like he was walking earlier than most kids. I'm almost positive that he was riding a bike before most kids. The week that he turned 3 years old, he was riding a bike with no training wheels. I don't think that's normal. I could be wrong. I don't know. But physical things just came easy to him. He was always involved and loved being a part of sports. We played soccer at a really young age. He was one of the best kids out on the field as far as the sports goes and his athletic ability. He got a lot of confidence from doing that sort of thing. And so we as a family, we enjoyed it, and it was a fun thing to do, get my kids out and about and learn how to work with other people. It was a great thing. So we got him involved in sports. At the age of 6, we had some friends that invited us to become a part of the Lake Jackson swim team. And so we decided that we would try it out. We had talked to Case, and he wanted to do it. And so we go to tryouts, and they tell us at the tryouts. Now, he'd been in a pool before, and he could swim from one side of the pool to the other. We weren't worried about that. But what they said at the tryouts is you got to be able to swim from this end of the pool to this end, and you have to have what they called a, quote, recognizable stroke. Now, that made me a little bit nervous. I didn't quite know what that meant. But my son, he's confident. He loves sports. He's good at this. It's his thing, right? So he jumps in to begin his tryout, and he starts making his way across the pool, but it wasn't very recognizable. I'll just say that. It was kind of a doggy paddle halfway and kind of trying to turn his head, and it was just ugly. But the truth is, I didn't care. If he made the team, that would have been great and it would have been fun. But if he made the team, that also meant that I was going to lose every one of my Saturdays that summer to a swim meet. And so I was perfectly fine if he didn't make the team. Anyway, he did not make the team that day. And the guy was very honest and genuine with us. He said, but he gave us an opportunity. He said, go try out for another couple of weeks, and we'll have another tryout. He can try again. Now, I was fine. Let's quit. Let's be done. No big deal. But something changed because Kason, he came to me, and he was ready to quit just like that. He wasn't good at it. He wasn't the best kid in the pool, and he was discouraged, and he's done. And something in me rose up. I'm like, I can't have a kid like that. I need a kid that knows how to work for something. I need a kid that's not going to quit when things get hard, right? I saw this as like a formational moment, a time that could really change his life. It could be a teachable thing. So I encouraged him in spite of what he felt, and it did take some encouragement. Let's go work at it. So we worked for those 2 weeks, and he practiced. We got him some private swim lessons, and he came back and he tried out, made the team. It was beautiful. The second try, it was amazing. Now, he went on later that very same year, and he got 6th place in the state for his backstroke. 6 and under, 6th place in the state. As an 8 and under, he got the state record. I think it still holds to this day. I'm not sure. I haven't checked it. It's not that important to me. He went on later and actually went to nationals and got some gold medals at nationals. Kaysen did a great thing, and I'm really proud of him. But you know what I'm proud of? Not those medals, not those accomplishments. I'm proud of who he's become. I'm proud that he's not the kid that's going to quit when things get hard. You know, he's got a little grit. He's willing to work hard at something. And when it becomes tough, he's going to work it out and he's going to figure it out. Today, he's actually a swim coach for that same swim team. So we got kind of this full circle kind of moment. And so it's kind of cool. Swim has really been awesome for us as a family. It's been a great thing. God has used it to shape us in many ways over time. We're really grateful for swim and what it's been in our lives. Now, when Randy asked me to share ways that God is shaping me and the ways that he's shaped our family, this is one of the first stories that I thought about because it was such a clear moment that I recognized. And I knew that it could be important for Kaysen in his future. As a discipleship minister here, for Randy to ask me to talk about Chisels and the way God that is shaping me and how he shapes and forms all of us, man, this is right up my alley. This is what my job is all about. So I'm excited to be able to share these things with you. Just as a discipleship minister, this is beautiful. So I think it's important as we begin this whole process to think about one thing. We are being shaped all the time, right? Shaped, formed, chiseled, whatever you want to call it, molded. Something is formed in us every single day. Every day we're formed, good and bad. If I'd have let Kaysen quit that day, something would have been formed in him there too, right? Not what I wanted for him as a father, but something would have been formed. We can't avoid change. Spiritual formation, it's guaranteed. We can't get away from it. We're going to be formed. The question is not, are we being formed? The question is, who has the chisel in hand? While God works to make us more like him, the world aims to chisel away and distort the image of God that's in us. God wants us to look more like him. The world's going to chisel away and destroy that image that he's put in us, right? God's going to win that battle every day when we abide with him and we give him the space to work. That's good news, right? But when we don't abide with him, when we place our lives in the hands of the world, or maybe we're apathetic about it, maybe we're not intentional about it, then we're putting ourselves in danger of being formed into something other than God's highest and best. This is where it gets tough. I mean, this moment with Kaysen, it was an obvious moment. When he was ready to quit, it just jumped out at me like, here's an opportunity. You can't let it be this way. It was obvious to me that something had to be done. It was a clear moment for him to learn something. I saw the moment, and I responded well, which is not always the case. Sometimes it's not that way at all. But it's not always obvious, right? Sometimes these moments are harder to see. Sometimes these moments are subtle. Sometimes I miss them. I don't recognize all the ways that I'm being shaped. Sometimes these things creep into our lives, subtle things that might be good things, but they creep in and then gradually, bit by bit, they're snagging and taking little pieces of our heart. If they take enough of those pieces, we're in trouble, right? These good things that are grabbing little parts of us, added together, they can become like little g God things. Good things that become like God's, those are bad things. That means we got to get rid of some of the good things sometimes. Now, I'm going to share a story with you today from the Old Testament. I'm going to give you a little bit of background and history on the story before we get into it, but I believe it's a similar situation. That's why I wanted to share it today. It's a moment when God sees his children, just like I saw Kason. He sees his children, and there's this formational moment that happens. And so what's happening is that God's children, it's his chosen people in the Old Testament. They're Israelites, is what they call them. They have been in slavery in Egypt for 400 years. They were shaped and they were forged into slaves in Egypt. God saw them there, and he loved them as they were, but he didn't want to leave them there. He wanted more for them. He wanted them to represent him to the rest of the world. And so he comes up with this amazing plan. He miraculously rescues them out of slavery. You guys remember the movie Prince of Egypt, right? He rescues them out of slavery, and he has a plan to bring them into the new land for a new start. Unfortunately, if they're going to represent him to the rest of the world, they've still got this slave mindset, right? They've been rescued. They're no longer slaves. But he's going to have to form and to shape them to look more like himself. He's got to do that with us too, right? We got to be willing to let him shape us too. All of this meant that they had to be holy, they had to be set apart, they had to be spiritually pure. So God had to keep them to himself. He had to be their only influence. He had to keep them away from the distractions or anything that might hinder their holiness. He had to be the only influence, so he had to keep them away from those things. So they entered the new promised land. When they did it, God told them not to make any treaties with the people that are there. He didn't want them interconnected with the people that are there because the people that are there are not representing him. They don't reflect who he is. So he was keeping them away from that. Not only did he tell them not to make the treaties where they would have those influences, because he wanted to be their only influence, not only did he tell them not to make the treaties, he also told them, destroy them. Destroy the kings and the idols that they find in the land. Destroy the distractions. By the way, God still wants this for us. He wants to destroy the distractions and the things that are in our own hearts so that he might rule and reign in our lives and be our only influence, right? Destroy the distractions that hinder our holiness. Now let's think for a minute about these distractions, these kings that were supposed to be destroyed. What is a king? Kings hold authority over a specific location or a people. They're sovereign over a certain territory. They hold power over a people. And so God tells Joshua, by the way, Joshua is the leader of the Israelites at this time, God's people. He tells them to remove the kings in the land and to destroy them because God himself would be the only king. No other kings, only God himself. He alone is king. He alone is in control. He will not share his authority. If we're going to represent him to the world, if they're going to represent him to the world, then they had to have him as first place in their lives. There's an English writer from the 1800s named John Ruskin. He says this: God will put up with a great many things in the human heart, but there's one thing that he will not put up with in it: a second place. He who offers God a second place offers him no place. As Christ followers, we have to remove all the kings and idols that once occupied territory in our hearts. We must clear the land and offer our hearts to Jesus, the one and only King, and then continue to protect and defend what is his. If our hearts are his, right? Now, quick little plug here, side note, sort of side note. Rooted. If you have not done the Rooted experience here at Brazos Point, I want to encourage you to sign up and do that as quickly as you can. My wife and I just went through it. We had an incredible experience, met some incredible people. It's been a great thing for us. Formed and shaped us. A chisel in our lives. Rooted is one of those things. So if you've not signed up, I think you can sign up in August, and then in September is when it will all begin again. So if you've not done it, please do so. But the reason I bring it up is this. For those of you in the room who have done it, you probably remember week 5. Week 5 is the strongholds week. In week 5, the whole evening is focused on some of the obvious kings. Just like this obvious moment that I had with Kason, I knew it. These obvious moments with Joshua, there are some obvious kings in our own lives, these strongholds. Some of them, they are things like fear and pride, bitterness, control, despair, sexual immorality, insecurity, deceit. The list could go on and on, right? These are clear and obvious and easy to spot kings that need to be destroyed in our lives. Joshua, at this point, they're coming into the promised land, and Joshua has found success. He's been listening to God, and there are some strongholds there. The first one they come to is Jericho. You may remember that story from years ago if you were in Sunday school or something. And then there's the city of Ai, and God listens. Joshua listens to God, obeys him, and they find some incredible success. But the enemies I want to talk to you about today are not obvious ones like Jericho and Ai. These are the subtle ones. These are the ones that sneak in. These are the ones that pretend, kings that pretend to be friends. These guys are harder to spot. So I want to have you turn in your Bibles to Joshua chapter 9. Joshua is the 6th book of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and then Joshua. So it's relatively close to the beginning. You can follow along there. If you don't have a Bible, you can follow along on the screen as well. I would also say, if you don't have a Bible, please stop by the Welcome Center. We would love to give you one on the way out today. Now remember, before I read, God's forming his people, right? They've been slaves, and so they have this slave mentality. But God wants them to represent him. He's wanting to make them holy. God's told them to destroy the kings and idols in the land. At this point in the story, they've done really well. Joshua has listened and obeyed at every turn. They've found victory because God gave it to them at Jericho and Ai. In some pretty miraculous ways, actually. They're in a good place when all this happens. So, Joshua chapter 9, verse 1 says this. Now, when news of this, the news we're talking about there is Jericho and Ai, the victories that they had there. When this news reached the kings west of the Jordan, we're going to skip to verse 2, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon, these guys actually live in the promised land as well, when they heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They disguised themselves. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and it was moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, "We've come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." They weren't from a distant country, right? You catch their lie there? The Israelites said to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us. So how can we make a treaty with you?" They're not supposed to make treaties. "We are your servants," they said to Joshua. This is a lie as well. They actually want Joshua to serve them. But Joshua asked, "Who are you and where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, 'Take provisions for your journey. Go and meet them and say to them, "We are your servants. Make a treaty with us." This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you. But now, see how dry and moldy it is? And these wineskins that we filled were new. But see how cracked they are? And your clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey. The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live. And the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. Now I read this and I go, what? Wait a minute. Joshua, like he's a hero of the Bible, right? This is the guy that's supposed to be our example. God has used him in these mighty ways, and God is going to continue to use him in mighty ways. How could this happen? Joshua's a godly man. But he was deceived, right? He was tricked. The Gibeonites, these weren't obvious kings like Jericho and Ai were. They were subtle kings. They were hiding. They were pretending to be friends. Pretended to be from another land. But did you notice as we read where he messed up? Did you see it? In verse 14, it says, Joshua did not inquire of the Lord. He didn't inquire of the Lord. I mean, Joshua undermined the whole thing just by powering through on his own. The Lord had given him success in 2 huge victories. He was confident. He's on a winning streak. Thought he was in control. And so, he relied on himself. I've done that too. Let's get personal here. What are the deceptive kings that are in your life? Think about it for a moment. Who are your Gibeonites? What's fighting for more territory in your life? If you're a Christ follower, all of it is his territory. So if there's something fighting for territory in your life, and it's not him, it's a subtle king. It's a Gibeonite. What are the things, the habits or activities that have crept into your life, grabbing piece by piece, trying to consume you? These aren't necessarily bad things. They might even be good things. They're not obvious kings, though. These are Gibeonites, the subtle deceivers. Now, if I'm honest with you, and I will be, I got more of these than I care to admit. I'm going to tell you about one of them today. Actually, in some ways, I've kind of already told you about this Gibeonite king that's in my life. The story about Kaysen and the swim team, that's kind of where it all started. Over the years, that amazing formational moment with him has grown into a Gibeonite king. Today, that king goes by another name, though. Water polo. Now, don't get me wrong. We love water polo. It's been a great thing for our family. The community of people that do water polo are amazing. It's just really that it's not always a great and godly thing either. It's a subtle thing that's reached into our lives. Both school and club water polo have occupied territory that was once the Lord's. We've missed worship services for water polo tournaments. We've spent money on food, gas, fees, tournaments, practices, camps. All that money could have been used for godly and kingdom purposes. We've also spent lots of emotional energy. I can't tell you how many phone calls there have been about, water polo drama and who's playing which position and that sort of thing. And then we've got tears that have been shed over water polo. But the biggest culprit when it comes to the emotional stuff Anybody want to guess what it is? It's probably true of almost any sport. A bad call. When the ref makes a bad call, man, I am up out of my seat, yelling and screaming and swinging my arms. It's not fair, right? You didn't see that right. I'm screaming all kinds of things and acting the fool. It got so bad last season at one game, I'm screaming and yelling. The ref actually turns around from down there by the pool, off the pool deck, and he looks back up at me, and he starts yelling back at me. He says, "You think you're a better ref than me?" And then he pulls out a little thing. He starts telling me the dates that I could sign up to become a ref. That didn't slow me down, though. I just kept yelling like a fool, like an idiot. And here's the kicker right here. This is what I was wearing that day. I am a walking contradiction, y'all. I need Jesus. A bad call is like the fast track for anger to become my king. That's what happens in those moments. And I can't let that be the case. What I'm trying to say to you in all of this is that there's a line with water polo or with whatever your Gibeonite king is. There is a line between what is godly and what is not. And with water polo, I have done like this. I've been on both sides of that line. To be clear, it's not all bad. Water polo is good. There are the side that is good, that happens as well. There are great and godly things that have happened. We've had spiritual conversations with people that are not church people. We've been able to be a steady and consistent witness among lots of folks on there. And the drama that happens on the team and that sort of thing, we've learned how to work with people. And God has used those things to shape us in some mighty ways as well. My guess is with this line of what is godly and what is not, it's probably happened to you too. I know I've seen some of you jumping out of seats yelling and screaming at games and stuff too. So I know it's happening at least to some degree. It's probably not water polo for most of you, but there is some sort of Gibeonite that's in your life. Maybe it's another sport. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's social media, a habit. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, it's like a subtle slope. It's not a big steep drop, just barely moving down, right? Slowly, seemingly unchangeable. We're shaped, at least we were, shaped by just a series of tiny, little bitty decisions. When we started, there were no games on Sundays, so we thought we were good. However, as the kids got older, the schedules got more demanding, and one Sunday we said, team is counting on us. We can't let them down. It's just 1 week. Our kids are really connected to their friends at church still. We justified it. We justified it. Each decision was small enough that it was easy to write it off. Like Joshua, though, we were deceived. And like Joshua, I didn't inquire of the Lord. I thought I didn't need his help because it seemed like such a small decision, and I relied on myself. There's an author named Mark Lawrence. He says this: there's a slope towards evil, a gentle gradient that can be ignored at each step unfelt. It's not until you look back, see the distant heights from where you once lived, that you understand your journey. That's where I am right now. I'm looking back from where we've come from, and I'm seeing the path to where we are headed, and I know that this is my fault. I can see it clearly now, and I've got to do something different. So what do I do? Do I go to my kids and say, we're kicking water polo out of our lives, it's over, we're done? I mean, I do think that is the answer sometimes. But in this case, I don't think it's that simple. It's more complicated. It's more nuanced than that. So I have to go to the Word. I can't come up with the answer myself. So Joshua chapter 9, same chapter, verse 27. This is what happens the day the day that he finds out that he had been deceived. The very first two words, that day. So when he had been deceived, when he realized he had been deceived, he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly to provide for the need of the altar of the Lord. To provide for the need of the altar of the Lord. He made them woodcutters and water carriers. That's not the important piece. The important piece is that they are servants to the Lord at this point. Do you see it? Like, he didn't go back on his word. He didn't break his promise. He didn't break his treaty. He didn't kick them out. He made them servants of the Lord. It's really genius. He put God back in his rightful place. He put the Lord over the Gibeonites. Now, I think that's my answer. I think that's the answer that I've been looking for. And I also think it's the answer that you're looking for. It's the answer for all of us. We got to make him king over it all. We got to put him on the throne. He deserves to sit in his rightful place, which is never second place. In the ways that your Gibeonite serves him, man, you're good. But in the ways that your Gibeonite does not serve him, those are harder decisions, right? But you know the answer to those decisions. The question is not if you know what's right and wrong in that situation. The question is, do you have the courage to make the decision that has to be made? How will we choose to be shaped in those moments? Will you choose the chisel that's in God's hand or the one that's in the hand of your Gibeonite? Choose you this day. That's what Joshua says later on. Here's what I know. We got to do something different. We can't just keep doing what we've been doing. We got to be intentional. Like my son Kason, it's going to take grit and it's going to take hard work, and it's going to be more than 2 weeks like it was for him. We need to create new practices and habits so that our reflex is to make him king. Some things we can learn from Joshua. First of all, be wise. Inquire of the Lord. Don't be deceived. Inquire of the Lord. The big things, the obvious kings, but also these subtle kings. You got to continue to inquire of the Lord, even on the little things that you think you can handle on your own. You can't. Secondly, we got to be ready. Refuse to rely on ourselves. That was where I messed up. Third, we got to prioritize and we got to make him king over everything. This is the Brazos Point core value, right? Jesus over everything. Now I want to finish the story for you. So in the next chapter, the Gibeonites, these are the guys that deceived their way and tricked their way into a relationship and a treaty with Joshua. They get themselves in trouble and they come crying out to Joshua, come and help us and save us. Now, if I'm Joshua, I'm going, now they're going to get what they deserve, right? They're calling on Joshua, who they tricked into this treaty, to come and to help them and to save them. But he doesn't respond the way I would have. He comes with his full army, everything that is at his disposal. He brings it all to defend them and to protect them and to save them. It's beautiful, right? Because a few years later, Jesus is going to do the same thing for us. As the true king, Jesus rescues you in spite of your sin. Even if you come to him pretending that you're somebody else, he forgives you, he saves you, he protects you. But unlike Joshua, Jesus is not fooled. He knows every part of you and still makes an irrevocable treaty with you. You hearing that? He knows every part of you. Those secret parts that you don't want anybody to know about. He knows it. And he still offers you a treaty. This treaty is authorized by his work on the cross. It's signed by his own blood. It's an everlasting treaty. It gives you full rights as a child of the king who will rule and reign forever. If you invite other Gibeonites into your life, his territory, he will subdue them. In him there is only victory. Let him be a king of your heart. He is the only king of our hearts. Jesus is king. Jesus is king, right? Amen. Bow your heads with me. Dear God, we come to you today and I thank you and I praise you and I lift you up and give you glory and honor because you are our king. You rule and you reign over everything. The heavens and the earth, they declare your glory. The planets were formed and move around at your command. The wind and the waves, they listen to you. All of creation responds to you with a resounding yes, yes. And yet, Lord, when I look at my heart, full of kings and idols, hardened and distracted, I have the audacity to tell you no. Lord, forgive me. Turn me away from these ways and back to you. Teach me to inquire of you at every turn. Give me courage to choose the chisel that's in your hand. Send your spirit to lead me to destroy the distractions so that I might be holy and represent you well. Lord, you are king over everything. Today, may you be king over my heart too. Amen.